They called me wolfless, broken, unworthy of love. Under the harvest moon, my mate cast me aside before the Bloodveil Pack, and in that moment, I thought my story had ended. But fate is cruel, and the moon goddess is crueler. When silence fell upon the land and wolves were stripped of their voices, only I remained untouched. They feared me, hated me, yet they needed me. For within the hollow of my soul lies a power no alpha, no witch, no curse could ever bind. I was Elysia Duskbane, the rejected mate, but I would become something far darker, far stronger. The hollow soul of the Bloodveil Pack. Elysia Duskbane stood beneath the swollen harvest moon, its pale light painting her skin in silver. The courtyard of the Bloodveil Pack pulsed with whispers, eyes glittering like shards of glass in the night. Wolves lined the steps of the high stone days, watching as their alpha prepared to pass judgment. Adrian Rowan's gaze was as cold as the autumn wind. He stood tall, broad-shouldered, his wolf shimmering beneath his skin, power rolling off him in silent waves. His voice cut through the night, steady, unyielding. She is wolfless, broken. She cannot be my Luna. The words shattered through Elysia's chest, sharper than claws. The mate bond that tied her to him flared in agony, a thread set ablaze. Gasps rippled through the crowd, but none dared challenge him. Her lips parted, but no words came. She wanted to scream, to demand why the moon goddess had cursed her so, why she would be bound to a man who cast her aside. Instead, silence clung to her throat, heavy and suffocating. Adrian turned his back on her, his dark cloak sweeping the stone. At his side, Vivian Solaria stepped forward, graceful, perfect, golden-eyed, a wolf radiant with power. She pressed a hand to Adrian's arm, already claiming the place Elysia had been denied. The pack howled in approval, their voices a knife in Elysia's ears. She stood motionless, forcing herself not to break before them. Her heart bled behind her ribs, but her spine remained straight. Only when the voices rose louder did she turn away, walking into the shadows of the whispering glade. Her world had ended, and not a single soul reached for her. The whispers followed Elysia into the night like claws scraping down her spine. The Bloodveil Pack had always looked at her with pity, sometimes with disdain, but now their contempt had been sharpened into knives. Wolfless, unfit, cursed. The words slithered through the crowd as she walked past them, her head held high though every breath rattled with the weight of humiliation. She could feel their stares, some mocking, some pitying, most indifferent. No one moved to comfort her. No one dared to challenge Adrian Rowan's decree. Children tugged at their mothers' hands, whispering questions. Warriors smirked, their laughter hushed but cruel. Even the elders shook their heads, muttering about the weakness of her bloodline. Elysia's chest burned, but she forced herself not to falter. She would not give them the satisfaction of seeing her break. As she left the courtyard and stepped into the shadows of the whispering glade, the chorus of derision seemed to fade into the sighing trees. Here the air was thick with damp earth and old magic. She had always felt the pull of this place, though she never spoke of it. To the pack, the glade was merely hunting ground. To her, it was something more, a refuge. She pressed a hand to her chest where the mate bond still seared like a wound. The moon goddess had bound her to Adrian, only to let him rip the bond apart with his rejection. Why give her a mate, only to make him despise her? Why carve love into her heart, only to salt the wound with betrayal? Her knees buckled, and she sank onto the moss, swallowing back the sob clawing up her throat. The harvest moon watched her from above, pale and pitiless. For a long moment, she hated its light, hated the goddess it represented, hated the destiny she could not escape.
And yet, even as despair hollowed her chest, the glade seemed to hum around her. The leaves rustled though no wind stirred them, and the roots of the ancient trees pulsed faintly beneath her palms. She was nothing, wolfless, rejected, scorned. But the forest whispered otherwise. By dawn, the sting of rejection had not faded. It pressed against Elysia's chest like a weight she could not shrug off. Yet life in the Bloodveil Pack left no room for mourning. Wolves still bled, children still sickened, and hunters' arrows still tore flesh. Broken or not, wolfless or not, she was still their healer. The healer's hut sat at the farthest edge of the whispering glade, half forgotten, half shunned. Its thatched roof sagged, its walls leaned like weary shoulders. Inside, bundles of dried herbs hung from the beams, their scents, sage, lavender, bitterroot, wrapping the air in a fragrance of earth and ash. Elysia had built this place with her own hands, stone by stone, plank by plank. It was not grand, but it was hers. She set to work with mechanical precision, grinding herbs into pastes, brewing tinctures over a low fire. Her hands moved from habit, but her mind drifted. She remembered the look in Adrian's eyes the night before. Not hatred, not cruelty, but cold dismissal, as though she were a tool too dull to keep. That cut deeper than rage ever could. The morning passed, with wolves arriving one by one, seeking her skill but never her presence. A warrior with a gash across his thigh scowled as she stitched him, refusing to meet her gaze. A mother brought her fevered pup, thanking her curtly before hurrying out, as though Elysia's touch might stain the child. They needed her hands, but not her heart. When the hut finally emptied, silence filled the space again. She sank into her chair, exhaustion pressing down like a shroud. She pressed her palm against the rough wooden table, trying to anchor herself, but her fingers itched, her skin prickled. That same strange hum she had felt in the whispering glade returned, crawling under her flesh like restless fire. Her gaze drifted to the small vial resting on the shelf, a tincture she had brewed under the light of the hollowed tree of Vera. It glowed faintly, a shimmer like moonlight trapped in glass. She had never told anyone about it, never dared. The pack believed her wolfless, powerless, and perhaps she was. But the forest whispered differently, and somewhere in its song she felt a promise that she was not as broken as they believed. The Bloodveil Pack did not mourn the absence of Elysia Duskbane. They celebrated instead. Only 2 nights after her rejection, the courtyard blazed with torchlight once more. Wolves gathered in their finery, silks woven with silver thread, collars glinting with moonstone charms. The air was thick with wine, laughter, and anticipation. At the center stood Vivian Celeria, radiant as if the moon itself had crowned her. Her gown shimmered white as frost, clinging to her tall, elegant frame. Golden eyes glowed beneath the lanterns, her wolf prowling just beneath her skin. She stood with perfect posture, her beauty sharpened by pride. The crowd drank her in, whispering about strength, about promise, about destiny fulfilled. And at her side, Adrian Rowan, the alpha, the man who had torn Elysia's world apart with 12 careless words. He wore the mantle of power as if it had been forged for him alone, his broad shoulders wrapped in a cloak of black fur. His hand rested lightly on Vivian's arm as he introduced her to his people, not as a guest, not as a consort, but as Luna. The declaration rang across the stone courtyard, met with thunderous approval. Wolves howled in unity, voices rising like storm winds, the sound vibrating against the old stones. From the shadows beyond the circle of firelight, Elysia watched. She should not have been there. She should have stayed hidden in her hut, away from the celebration of her own erasure. Yet something had drawn her here. Perhaps cruelty, perhaps defiance, perhaps the stubborn hope that it was not real. But it was real. She saw the way Adrian's eyes softened when he looked at Vivian. She saw the way Vivian leaned into his touch, triumphant smile curling her lips. Every gesture was a blade, carving deeper into Elysia's chest. The mate bond pulsed within her, agonizing, relentless, reminding her that no matter how he rejected her, her heart remained tethered. The pack had chosen their queen. The alpha had chosen his Luna. And Elysia was nothing more than the ghost at the edge of the firelight, unclaimed, unwanted, fading into the silence of the whispering glade. But the forest did not laugh at her. The forest whispered. And though she did not yet understand its voice, it promised that her story was far from over.
Elysia tried to leave the celebration behind her, but the bond did not loosen its grip. The moment Adrian Rowan's declaration of Vivian Solaria as Luna echoed across the courtyard, a pulse of pain rippled through her chest. She staggered against the trunk of a tree at the edge of the whispering glade, clutching at her ribs as though something living clawed at her from within. The mate bond. Though Adrian had spoken his rejection beneath the harvest moon, the sacred thread between them had not fully severed. It writhed and burned inside her, a cruel reminder that the moon goddess's will could not be undone by pride or politics. Every laugh that left Adrian's lips sent a phantom warmth coursing through her veins. Every glance he cast at Vivian tugged at the tether that bound them, tearing her heart anew. The pack sought triumph, but Elysia felt only torment. She pressed her forehead against the bark, breathing in the damp, loamy scent of the forest. "Why me?" she whispered, her voice hoarse. "Why him?" The goddess gave no answer, only silence. Yet within that silence, the forest stirred. Leaves rustled, though no wind moved them. The roots beneath her feet seemed to hum faintly, vibrating in rhythm with the pulse of her bond. It was as though the whispering glade recognized her pain, acknowledged her, even when her people would not. From afar, Adrian's eyes brushed over her. Just for a moment, so quick she might have imagined it, but she knew she hadn't. The bond flared, fierce and raw, as if he too still felt it. His jaw tightened, his hand flexed where it rested on Vivian's arm. Then, almost violently, he turned away, drowning himself in the celebration. Elysia's breath shuddered out. He could deny her with words, with vows, with another woman's touch, but he could not deny the truth written into their very souls. The mate bond lived, and as much as she longed to tear it free, she knew it would haunt them both until fate itself decided otherwise. The night of celebration waned, but unease lingered in the marrow of the Bloodveil Pack. Wolves laughed, drank, and danced, yet beneath the revelry something darker stirred. Elysia felt it first. As she drifted back through the whispering glade, the air thickened, heavier as storm clouds. The forest had always whispered to her, but now the whispers were different, strained, urgent, like voices warning of something unseen. The earth itself seemed to hold its breath. She paused beneath the twisted boughs of the hollowed tree of Vera. Its roots coiled outward like veins, pulsing faintly with a light that only she could see. She pressed her palm against the bark, and the hum grew louder, resonating inside her bones. A chill spread through her, seeping deeper than the autumn air. Something was coming. Back in the courtyard, Adrian Rowan lifted his goblet in a toast to his pack and his new Luna. But as the howls of approval echoed around him, a sharp flicker crossed his features.
His voice caught for just a heartbeat too long, his breath stilled. No one noticed, except Elysia. She felt it through the bond, a stutter, a crack, as though his voice itself had brushed against some unseen wall. The sensation jolted her, sharp and cold. She pressed a trembling hand to her chest, gasping quietly in the shadows. The wolves around him cheered louder, oblivious to the tension in the air. Yet as the fires burned lower, an unnatural hush began to creep through the pack. Conversations faltered. Laughter died mid-breath. The joyous din collapsed into a fragile quiet, thin as glass. Elysia's pulse thundered in her ears. She knew this was no mere silence of weariness. This was something else, something vast and heavy and wrong. The forest whispered one word, carried through the rustling leaves: beware. And though she did not yet know its name, the shadow of the Howling Silence had already begun to fall upon them.
The morning after the celebration dawned gray and heavy, the sky veiled in clouds that refused to part. A strange stillness pressed against the Bloodveil Packlands, thick enough to make the air itself feel reluctant to move. Elysia Duskbane was grinding herbs at her hut when the first scream tore across the glade. She dropped her mortar, the sound sharp against the silence that followed. Heart hammering, she ran toward the village center. What she found rooted her in place. Wolves littered the courtyard, half-shifted, bodies twisted as if frozen mid-motion. Warriors had collapsed mid-sparring, claws extended, jaws open in silent roars. Mothers knelt over pups, whose mouths moved soundlessly, eyes wide with terror. The pack's voices gone. Her gaze snapped to the dais. Adrian Rowan stood there, one knee pressed into the stone as though crushed by an invisible weight. His body rippled with the beginning of a shift, but the change had locked halfway, muscles rigid, bones straining beneath his skin. His throat convulsed as he tried to speak, but no sound emerged. His golden eyes, usually so fierce, burned with raw panic. Vivian Solaria clutched his arm, her lips moving in frantic commands, but nothing escaped her mouth. She shook him, helpless, her own voice stolen. Elysia's breath hitched, the scene around her twisting into a nightmare. Dozens of wolves writhed in agony, their howls trapped inside them. The very air seemed smothered, thick with a silence that devoured sound itself. She staggered forward, her pulse roaring in her ears, the only sound that remained. Instinct pulled her toward Adrian, the mate bond sparking hot and jagged inside her chest. His eyes locked on hers, desperate, pleading. And for the first time, she felt it. The curse like threads in the air, cold and jagged, woven tightly around the pack. It brushed against her skin like icy cobwebs. Yet when it touched her, it unraveled and slid away, powerless. She stood amidst the chaos, the only wolf left untouched, the only voice left in a world suddenly smothered by silence. The curse had fallen, and Elysia Duskbane alone remained free. The silence grew heavier with each passing breath, pressing down on the Bloodveil Pack like a suffocating shroud. Wolves clawed at their throats, mouths open in silent screams. Pups clung to their mothers, eyes wide with terror as they tugged at skirts and sleeves, begging for comfort they could no longer hear. Warriors slammed fists against the stone courtyard, desperate to break free of the invisible chains binding them. But no sound came, not a cry, not a growl, not even the crack of bone from a halted shift. Only stillness, only silence. Elysia Duskbane staggered among them, her hands trembling, her ears ringing with the absence of what should have been. A cacophony of howls, growls, shouts. Instead, the world was muted, smothered, alien.
She pressed her palms to her ears as if to block it out, but there was nothing to block. Only the frantic pounding of her own heart filled the void. She rushed to the nearest warrior, his body half-shifted, claws curved and useless. His eyes locked onto hers, wild and panicked, begging for something she didn't know how to give. She touched his arm, expecting the same cold threads of magic that strangled him to coil around her as well. But when they brushed against her skin, they recoiled, hissing away like mist under fire. The curse did not want her. Her gaze swept across the courtyard, drawn inexorably to the dais. Adrian Rowan still knelt there, his body rigid, veins straining against skin as if the force of his own wolf was tearing him apart from the inside. His throat worked violently, his lips shaping words he could not speak. Sweat ran down his temples, his chest heaving with useless effort. When his golden eyes found hers, time seemed to fracture. The alpha of the Bloodveil Pack, proud, unyielding Adrian Rowan, looked at her not as a reject, not as the wolfless omega he had cast aside, but as the only anchor left in a world unraveling. His gaze pleaded in silence, "Help me."
Adrian Rowan's body convulsed as the curse tightened around him, every muscle straining against the invisible bonds. His half-shifted form rippled with suppressed power, claws tearing at the stone beneath him, fangs bared in a soundless snarl. But no growl, no roar, no command left his throat. The alpha of the Bloodveil Pack was trapped, voiceless, helpless. His golden eyes locked onto Elysia Duskbane with a desperation she had never seen in him before. They burned, not with pride, not with anger, but with raw plea. He tried to move toward her, but his body refused, every step faltering as though the curse itself dragged him back. The mate bond surged between them, hot and jagged. Elysia staggered under the weight of it, clutching at her chest as the force of his emotions poured into her. Fear, rage, shame. She could feel them thrumming through the thread that still tethered their souls together. "Help me!" The words struck her not in her ears, but in her bones. He hadn't spoken them, couldn't speak them, but the bond carried them across the silence, echoing inside her like a heartbeat. She shook her head violently, tears pricking her eyes. "No, you made your choice, Adrian. You cast me aside. You chose her." Her voice cracked, echoing into the void where no other voice could exist. The only sound left in the courtyard was hers, and it felt like a betrayal to speak when the rest were bound. Adrian's lips moved, his jaw trembling with effort. His mouth formed her name, Elysia. He repeated it again and again, silent but unmistakable. The bond seared hot, as though each unspoken syllable branded itself onto her skin. Her heart thundered against her ribs. She wanted to look away, to let him drown in the silence he had condemned her to, but she couldn't. The pull between them was too strong. Even rejected, even humiliated, she could not sever the tie that bound them. He was begging her. Adrian Rowan, proud alpha, was begging the mate he had scorned. And she, Elysia Duskbane, wolfless, scorned, forgotten, was the only one who could hear him. The threads of the curse shimmered in the air like spider silk, invisible to the rest of the Bloodveil Pack, but blindingly clear to Elysia Duskbane. They coiled through the courtyard, weaving around every wolf, every child, every elder, binding their throats and stilling their shifts. The magic pulsed with hunger, feeding on their power, tightening with every breath they tried to take. But when the threads touched her, they recoiled. At first she thought it was chance, some quirk of fate. Yet as she moved, the magic brushed against her again, curling around her arm like icy tendrils. The moment it made contact, it snapped back violently, unraveling in sparks that only she could see. Her breath caught. She reached out deliberately this time,
brushing her fingers against the shimmering threads that bound a warrior writhing on the ground. Cold seared her skin, then fizzled out, as though snuffed by a void inside her. The strands dissolved into nothing, and for a heartbeat, the warrior's eyes cleared, his body loosening, before the curse surged back and claimed him again. Elysia staggered back, her pulse racing. She wasn't immune. No, something inside her was consuming it. The forest's whispers roared suddenly in her ears, louder than ever before. Words woven in rustling leaves, in the creak of roots, in the tremor of the hollowed tree of Vera. You are not empty. You are the hollow soul. The truth slammed into her chest. She was not wolfless. She was something else entirely. Something the pack had no name for. Her blood carried no wolf, but it carried something deeper. A void. A hollow space that did not repel magic, but devoured it, turned it to nothing. She pressed a trembling hand against her heart, panic and awe warring in her veins. All her life she had been told she was broken, unworthy, a mistake of the goddess. But now she saw what they could not. Her silence, her emptiness, was her strength. The curse could bind them all, but not her. Elysia Duskbane was the hollow soul, and that made her the only one who could break the howling silence.
The threads of the curse quivered in the air, taut and restless, as though straining toward an unseen anchor. Now that Elysia Duskbane knew what she was, she could see them more clearly. Silver-black strands woven through the very air, tangled around the wolves like marionette strings. She narrowed her eyes, following their pull. The threads all converged, tugging in one direction, stretching out beyond the whispering glade, toward the jagged horizon. The shattered maw. Every wolf in the Bloodveil Pack knew of it, the ruins of a cavern system deep within the North Cliffs, where shadows clung thicker than night, and where, it was said, witches once performed their darkest rites. Children were warned never to stray near it. Even seasoned warriors gave the cliffs a wide berth. And now Elysia could see why. The curse bled from that place like poisoned smoke, its strands stretching across the land until they bound the throats of every wolf. She could feel it thrumming in her bones, a cold, hungry vibration that grew stronger the longer she looked northward. Her knees weakened under the weight of the revelation. It wasn't random. It wasn't fate. Someone had chosen this curse. Someone had cast it deliberately, anchored it in the maw. Her gaze flicked back to Adrian Rowan. The alpha still knelt at the dais, trembling against the force of the curse, sweat dripping from his temple as his golden eyes burned into hers. The mate bond thrummed, thick with desperation. He didn't need to speak for her to understand. You know where it comes from. Elysia clenched her fists. She hated him for what he had done to her, but the truth clawed inside her chest. The pack would die without her. Wolves could not live long without their voices or their shifts. Their power was being siphoned, drained slowly into the shattered maw, and she alone could reach the heart of it. The forest's whispers rose around her, a chorus in the rustling leaves. Go to the maw. End the silence. Her choice was no longer hers alone. Elysia Duskbane had been claimed by the curse.
Elysia Duskbane stood frozen in the courtyard, her chest heaving as the truth of the curse's origin clawed at her mind. The threads pulled north, toward the shattered maw, and though every instinct screamed to run in the opposite direction, she knew she could not. The Bloodveil Pack was dying, slowly strangled by silence, and she was the only one who could unravel the noose. Her gaze drifted back to Adrian Rowan. The alpha knelt in agony, his body trembling under the weight of the curse. His golden eyes locked on hers with a ferocity that pinned her in place. Through the bond, his emotions bled into her, pride cracked open, desperation laid bare, shame curling sharp around every plea. He mouthed her name again, Elysia, his jaw trembling with the effort. The mate bond burned hot between them, a thread stretched thin but unbroken. It carried his meaning, even when his lips formed no sound. "Take me with you." Her breath caught, fury flaring in her chest. The audacity of him, the alpha who had cast her aside, humiliated her, replaced her. Now he begged for her help. Her lips curled bitterly, words spilling before she could stop them. "You rejected me. You chose her." Her voice trembled, the only voice left in the silent courtyard. Dozens of wolves stared at her with wide, pleading eyes, their own throats bound. "Why should I risk myself for you?" Adrian's body shuddered violently. His hands clawed at the stone, his throat spasming as he forced the bond to carry his answer. His meaning struck her, sharp and undeniable. "Because you are the only one who can." The truth seared through her. She wanted to turn away, to let him drown in the silence he had made for himself. But the forest whispered around her, its voice weaving with the mate bond, leaving her no escape. She could feel the weight of the goddess in the stillness, heavy with cruel design. She closed her eyes, hating the choice even as it formed. "Then we go together. To the mall." When she opened them again, Adrian's golden eyes burned with something more than desperation, something softer, something dangerous. And in that moment, Elysia knew this journey would cost her more than she was prepared to give.
The path north wound through the heart of the whispering glade, its tangled roots and shadow-thickened canopy forming a corridor of silence. Elysia Duskbane had walked these woods countless times in her solitude, yet now the air felt changed, charged. Every step carried the weight of the curse that pressed against the land, dragging her inexorably toward the shattered maw. Adrian Rowan limped at her side, his body still racked with the remnants of the curse. His half-shift lingered, a clawed hand, the faint glimmer of fur along his jaw, but his alpha strength kept him moving. He didn't falter, though the tightness of his jaw betrayed the pain that knotted through him. The silence between them was deeper than the curse itself. Elysia could hear the crunch of her boots on the forest floor, the rustle of leaves overhead, even the slow, ragged cadence of Adrian's breath. But there were no words, not from him, not from anyone. The howling silence still held the pack behind them, and she was its only escape. Her fingers brushed against one of the silver-black threads that shimmered faintly in the air. It recoiled at her touch, unraveling into nothing. She glanced sideways at Adrian, catching the way his eyes followed the motion. He had seen it too. His lips parted as if to speak, but only a rasp of breath escaped. The bond carried what his voice could not. "You are the key." The words clawed at her chest. She clenched her fists, quickening her pace to put distance between them. But the forest betrayed her. The path narrowed, forcing them close again, shoulder to shoulder. Elysia's skin prickled with awareness of him, his heat, his strength, the raw desperation radiating through the mate bond. She hated it, hated him for what he had done, but the tether between them was relentless. Each step toward the maw tightened it, binding her to the alpha she had sworn to despise. Above them, the moon broke through the canopy, spilling silver light across the path. The forest whispered in that light, its voice threading into her bones. Too bound by rejection, too bound by silence, only together will the maw be undone. Elysia's heart clenched. She was walking into damnation,
and the man who had shattered her was walking with her.
The forest swallowed them whole as the path narrowed, its canopy blotting out much of the moonlight. In the hush of the whispering glade, every sound seemed magnified, the drip of dew from the leaves, the crunch of earth beneath their boots, the faint rasp of Adrian Rowan's uneven breath. Elysia Duskbane kept her eyes forward, determined to ignore the man at her side. Yet the silence was suffocating, thicker even than the curse. Her throat itched with words unspoken, but she refused to break it. She had no desire to gift him the sound of her voice when his had condemned her to nothingness. Still, the mate bond was relentless. It pulsed between them, carrying fragments of what he could not say, worry, frustration, regret. The emotions came jagged and raw, cutting into her chest with every step. When Adrian stumbled, his hand brushed her arm. Unintentional, but the contact sent a crackle of heat sparking through the tether. She stiffened, ready to pull away, but his grip lingered just long enough to steady himself before releasing her. He gave her a look, golden eyes searching, as though silently asking permission to lean on her strength. Elysia's lips parted to snap at him, to remind him she was not his to depend on, but then she realized something. The mate bond was not the only language they shared. His eyes, his hands, his silence all spoke, and, against her will, she began to answer. A nod here, a tilt of her head there, a glance that warned, a gesture that urged him forward. Slowly, clumsily, they built something between them, a fragile lexicon of silence. When a branch cracked beneath her foot, his gaze flicked to the shadows, a warning. When his steps faltered, she slowed just enough to let him keep pace without the shame of lagging. It wasn't forgiveness, it wasn't trust, but it was communication. By the time they reached the edge of the clearing, the bond between them hummed with more than pain. It hummed with understanding, however fragile, however unwanted. Elysia's chest tightened. She didn't want this. She didn't want to understand him. But the forest whispered again, soft and insistent, only together. She clenched her fists, fighting the truth she didn't want to hear. The night deepened as the forest thickened around them. Branches clawed at the path, shadows stretched long, and the air grew colder with each step north. Elysia Duskbane wrapped her cloak tighter around her shoulders, but the chill wasn't from the autumn air. It was from the bond, restless, seething, alive. Adrian Rowan stumbled again, his half-shifted body trembling with effort. The curse clung to him more fiercely than to the others, straining against his alpha strength as though determined to break him. His knees buckled, and before she could think better of it, Elysia reached for him. Her hand met his arm, warm, solid, trembling beneath the weight of magic. The moment their skin touched, the mate bond flared like lightning through her chest. Heat surged from her fingertips, racing up her arm, slamming into her heart. Her breath caught, and for a heartbeat, the world narrowed to just the two of them. Adrian's golden eyes snapped to hers. They blazed, not with command or pride, but with something raw, something dangerous. The tether between them thrummed, carrying his unspoken thoughts straight into her bones. I need you. Elysia's throat tightened. She wanted to pull away, to remind him that he had chosen Vivian Solaria, that he had shattered her under the harvest moon. But her hand refused to move. The bond held her there, bound by something stronger than will. For the first time since his rejection, she felt not only his strength, but his vulnerability. His body shook beneath her touch, the alpha stripped bare of power, of voice, of control. He wasn't untouchable here in the glade. He was just a man caught in a silence he could not escape.
and the bond sang for him. The soundless chorus rose within her chest, fierce and relentless, a reminder of what could have been, what still was, whether she wanted it or not. Her heart ached, every beat echoing with a truth she could not bear. She ripped her hand away, gasping, stumbling back into the shadows. The bond recoiled, thrumming like a severed cord, but its song lingered. Adrian's eyes followed her, haunted, silent. But she didn't need words to know what he had felt, because she had felt it too. The mate bond was not dead. It was alive, burning, and it was going to destroy her.
They pressed deeper into the whispering glade, the silence growing heavier with each step. The trees stood like sentinels, their gnarled branches arching overhead to blot out the moonlight. The air tasted damp, thick with moss and secrets. Elysia Duskbane kept her gaze fixed ahead, refusing to look at Adrian Rowan. The echo of the bond still burned in her chest, a reminder of the spark that had surged when she steadied him. She hated herself for it. She hated him more. Yet the tether would not quiet. It pulsed with his emotions, carried unbidden into her heart. Not the sharp bite of command, not the heat of anger, but something she had never expected to feel from him: regret. It came jagged, raw, bleeding through the bond in waves that made her chest ache. Regret for his words under the harvest moon. Regret for Vivian Solaria at his side. Regret for her, the mate he had cast into the shadows. Her breath caught, and she nearly faltered. She tried to push it back, to wall herself off from the emotions pouring into her, but it was like trying to dam a river with her bare hands. His remorse seeped through every crack, soaking her to the bone. She clenched her fists, nails digging into her palms until they stung. "Don't you dare," she whispered under her breath, her words meant for no one but herself. "Don't you dare feel sorry now." Yet when she finally risked a glance, she saw it in his golden eyes, the sorrow, the shame. His lips trembled as if to speak her name, but the curse held his voice in chains. All he could do was look at her as though she were both salvation and condemnation. The forest's whispers twined around her, echoing the truth she did not want to hear. He regrets. He longs. He bleeds for you still. Her heart thudded painfully. She turned her face away, quickening her steps to put distance between them. But distance meant nothing to the bond. His remorse clung to her like smoke, inescapable. And though she told herself she despised him, part of her chest ached with the echo of what could have been, what still threatened to be again. The deeper they pressed into the northward path, the stronger the pull of the curse became. The threads of silence stretched taut through the whispering glade, quivering like spider silk drawn too tight, humming with power that made Elysia's skin prickle. Adrian Rowan faltered. His steps grew heavier, each stride a battle. His half-shifted form worsened, claws lengthening, fangs pressing against his lip, golden eyes glowing feral. His body trembled violently, as if torn between man and wolf, unable to settle into either. The curse seemed to sink sharper claws into him than anyone else, feeding greedily on his alpha strength. Elysia Duskbane glanced back just as his knee buckled, sending him crashing against a tree trunk. His hand clawed at the bark, gouging deep scars as his chest heaved. His throat convulsed, lips parting in a soundless roar, veins standing out along his neck. Her heart lurched against her will. The mate bond seared through her like fire, tarrying his torment into her chest. The pain was unbearable, as though his body were being split apart inside her own ribs. She stumbled, clutching her sternum, gasping for breath.
Adrian's golden gaze locked on hers, wild, pleading. He mouthed her name again, Elysia. His voice bound, but his meaning carried in raw, jagged pulses through the bond. "Help me." She froze, torn. Every scar of his rejection screamed to let him suffer, to let him taste the emptiness he had condemned her to. Yet, her legs moved of their own accord, carrying her to his side. She braced his trembling body with her own, her small frame straining beneath the weight of him. The moment her hand pressed against his chest, the curse threads recoiled violently, sparking as they dissolved into nothing around her touch. His body eased, if only slightly, breath rattling as the pain lessened. His eyes softened, not in command, not in pride, but in gratitude. The bond thrummed hot, alive, insistent. Elysia clenched her jaw, refusing to let the flicker of tenderness sway her. "Don't think this means I forgive you," she whispered, her voice the only sound in the cursed night. "I'm not saving you, I'm saving them." But even as she said it, her hand lingered a moment too long against his chest, betraying her. By the time the moon climbed high, the forest had grown too dark and treacherous to press on. The threads of the curse thrummed all around them, humming through the trees like a swarm of unseen insects. Reluctantly, Elysia Duskbane chose a clearing where the roots nodded high enough to shield them from the worst of the night air. She gathered twigs with quick, practiced hands. Flint struck, sparks caught, and soon a fire crackled in the center of the hollow, its glow painting their faces in amber and shadow. The sound of the flames was jarring after hours of cursed silence. It hissed and snapped, filling the void where voices should have been. Adrian Rowan sat opposite her, his broad frame slumped against a tree. His half-shift lingered, claws glinting faintly, fur shadowing his jaw. His breathing was ragged, uneven, as though every inhale cost him more than he could spare. Yet his golden eyes never left her. The weight of his gaze pressed heavy against her skin. She tried to ignore it, focusing instead on grinding dried herbs into a paste, the motions calming her hands, if not her heart. But the bond betrayed her. His emotions bled across it, seeping into her bones. Exhaustion, pain, shame, and beneath it all, something deeper. Regret, thick and bitter. When she finally looked up, his lips moved. Elysia. No sound, just the shape of her name. Her chest tightened. She wanted to tell him to stop, to keep his silence, as he had forced it upon her with his rejection. But his eyes, those fierce, unyielding alpha eyes, were haunted, vulnerable. He pressed a clawed hand to his throat, dragging it slowly downward, as though to show her how the curse had stolen his voice, how helpless he was without it. Elysia's throat burned. She looked away, staring into the fire. "You did this to me once, stripped me of worth, took my voice before the pack. Now you know what it feels like." The bond shuddered. His remorse struck her chest so hard it stole her breath. And when she dared glance back, his eyes glistened, not with anger, but with something dangerously close to sorrow. The fire popped, sparks leaping skyward. Elysia clenched her fists. She had sworn to hate him, but the silence between them was weaving something else, something fragile, dangerous, undeniable. The forest ended abruptly. One moment, the whispering glade pressed close around them. The next, the trees gave way to a jagged expanse of black stone and broken earth. Elysia Duskbane halted at the edge, her breath catching. Before them yawned the shattered maw. It was not merely a cave. It was a wound carved into the land itself, a vast fissure that split the cliffs like a gaping mouth.
Stalactites jutted downward like teeth, slick with damp, while the air that bled from its depths was cold and fetid, heavy with the stench of decay. Even the moonlight seemed reluctant to touch it, paling at its edge as though swallowed whole. The threads of the curse converged here, hundreds of them, drawn tight into the darkness. They pulsed with malignant energy, humming so loud in Elysia's bones she could barely stand. Her hollow soul recoiled and yearned all at once, drinking in the edges of the magic, hungering for more, even as it threatened to tear her apart. Adrian Rowan staggered at her side, one hand braced against the jagged cliff wall. His body shook violently, the curse gnawing at him more savagely now that they stood at its source. His golden eyes burned, feral with both pain and determination, as he lifted his gaze to meet hers. No words passed his lips, but the bond carried his meaning. This is it. Elysia swallowed hard, her throat dry. The maw seemed to breathe, exhaling a low, guttural hum that no mortal throat could make. Shadows shifted within its depths, moving with a rhythm too deliberate to be the wind. And from the blackness came a whisper, not the forest's gentle murmur, but a voice like cracked stone and withered leaves. "Come closer, child. You are late." Elysia's knees weakened. She had never heard the voice before, but her soul recognized it. This was no faceless curse. This was will. This was vengeance, and it waited for her within the maw. Adrian reached for her hand. She hesitated, then let him. The bond burned hot between them, their fear and defiance entwined. Together, they stepped into the mouth of the shattered maw, and the darkness closed around them. The air inside the shattered maw was damp and cold, each breath tasting of stone and rot. Shadows clung to the jagged walls, shifting with a life of their own. The curse's threads were thick here, tangled into dense ropes of power that pulsed with every heartbeat. Elysia Duskbane gripped Adrian Rowan's arm as they moved deeper into the cavern. The bond burned, carrying both his suffering and his determination into her chest. Each step closer made his body shake harder, his half-shifted form nearly buckling under the weight of the magic. Yet he pressed on, refusing to fall before her. Then the shadows stirred. From the depths of the cavern, a figure emerged, tall, cloaked in ragged black, her silver hair spilling like a veil around a face carved from sorrow and bitterness. Her eyes gleamed violet in the dim light, ancient and weary, but burning with fury. "Ah," the woman said, her voice the first true sound Elysia had heard in days. It scraped against the stone, brittle yet commanding. "The hollow soul comes at last." Elysia froze, the name striking her chest like a blade. The witch knew what she was. Adrian stepped forward instinctively, his body tense, claws flashing, but the curse jerked him to his knees with a violent spasm. He snarled silently, helpless, his golden eyes blazing hatred at the witch. The woman's lips curved into a bitter smile. "Do not waste your strength, Alpha. This silence is my gift to you, a taste of the emptiness your bloodline gave to me." Her gaze shifted to Elysia, heavy with venom. "I am Isolde Ravencroft. Once I was welcomed by your pack. Once I gave my heart to a Rowan." Her voice cracked on the name, eyes glittering with grief. "Melric Rowan, your uncle. He swore me love beneath the hollow tree of Vera. Then he abandoned me, cast me out as a witch, a curse to his kind." The threads of magic around her quivered, feeding on her anguish. "I loved him," she whispered, her tone breaking into jagged shards. "And he destroyed me, so I destroy all of you." Her hand lifted, and the air thickened with black energy. Shadows writhed like serpents, coiling toward Elysia and Adrian.
And in that moment, Elysia understood. The Howling Silence was not born of power alone, but of grief sharpened into vengeance.
The cavern shook with Isolde Ravencroft's fury. Her shadows lunged like living serpents, black coils snapping through the air with the weight of iron chains. The curse threads thickened, wrapping the walls, the ground, even the air itself, until Elysia Duskbane could scarcely breathe. Adrian Rowan dropped to one knee, his body racked by spasms. The curse drank deeply from his alpha strength, draining him faster now that they stood at its heart. His claws raked furrows into the stone floor as he fought to rise, his golden eyes blazing defiance even as his body failed him. Isolde's gaze fixed on Elysia. "You should not exist," she hissed, her voice echoing like splintered glass. "A hollow soul, a mistake the goddess herself tried to bury. And yet here you stand, proof that silence can be a weapon." Elysia's chest burned, the mate bond searing hot as Adrian's agony poured into her. But beneath it, something else stirred, something deep, something vast. The curse threads that bound the cavern recoiled from her, shivering away like smoke from a flame. Her hollow soul was hungry. A shadow spear hurtled toward her, tipped with seething black fire. She raised her hand without thinking. The moment it touched her skin, it unraveled, collapsing into sparks that vanished into her veins. A jolt of power surged through her, sharp and cold, yet it filled her with strength instead of pain. Isolde's eyes widened. Impossible. Elysia staggered but held her ground, her hand trembling as she stared at the space where the spear had been. "You can't bind me," she whispered, her voice steady despite her racing pulse. "I am not empty. I am the end of your curse." The shadows screamed, writhing in fury, Isolde's face twisted with rage, her grief curdling into something monstrous. "Then I will unmake you, hollow soul, as I should have at your birth." She hurled her power forward, a tidal wave of darkness that swallowed the cavern whole. And Elysia, heart pounding, body alight with strange hunger, stepped into it, her hollow soul devouring the silence that sought to consume her. The duel of silence raged within the cavern, shadows clashing against void. Elysia stood at the center, her hollow soul devouring each strand of Isolde Ravencroft's curse-born magic, drinking it into the emptiness that had always marked her as broken. For the first time, that brokenness felt like power. But Isolde was no ordinary witch. With every failed strike, her fury deepened, her grief sharpened into something jagged and merciless. She drew deeper from the maw's abyss, her hands weaving shadows into spears, her voice echoing with a sorrow that bled into rage. One of those spears slipped past Elysia's defense. Adrian Rowan moved before she could react. The jagged bolt of shadow pierced his chest, throwing him back against the stone wall. His body convulsed, the curse tightening around him as blood blossomed across his torn shirt. His golden eyes flared wide, burning with both pain and defiance, before dimming to a raw, trembling light. "Adrian!" Elysia's voice rang in the cavern, the only voice left to resist the silence. She fell to her knees beside him, her hands pressing against the wound. The mate bond seared hot, pulsing wildly, carrying his agony straight into her bones. She gasped as though she too had been struck, her own chest aching with phantom pain. He mouthed her name, Elysia, his lips trembling, his throat refusing him. Through the bond came his meaning, faint but steady. "Don't stop. Finish it." Tears blurred her vision. She shook her head, rage flooding her veins. "You will not take him from me," she spat at Isolde,
her voice echoing against the stone. The hollow soul inside her roared awake. The curse threads around Adrian's body recoiled violently, snapping like frayed wires, dissolving as her touch devoured them. Her emptiness surged outward, no longer only unraveling the curse, but tearing at the very fabric of Isolde's magic. The witch faltered, her face twisting as her power buckled under Elysia's rage. For the first time, it was not silence that ruled the cavern. It was Elysia Duskbane, the hollow soul, burning with fury, with grief, and with a strength born of love she could not deny.
The cavern trembled beneath the weight of colliding forces. Isolde Ravencroft's grief-forged shadows against the void of Elysia's hollow soul. Every strike the witch hurled unraveled the instant it touched her, dissolving into sparks that vanished into the emptiness of her chest. Elysia knelt over Adrian Rowan's wounded body, her hands slick with his blood, the mate bond blazing with his ragged heartbeat. His eyes, golden, fierce even in agony, urged her onward. "Finish it," the tether whispered, sharp and unyielding. She rose. The curse threads swarmed around her, thick ropes of silence that had bound every wolf of the Bloodveil Pack. She reached for them, her hands trembling, and felt the raw hum of their magic vibrating through her skin. They recoiled from her touch, as if fearing the void inside her. And then she pulled. The hollow soul within her surged to life, devouring strand after strand, swallowing them whole. The silence shattered in waves, unraveling faster than the witch could weave. Elysia felt the threads dissolving into her veins, her body trembling as the weight of it filled her. She feared it would consume her, that the void would open too wide and swallow her whole. But then she thought of Adrian, of his sacrifice, his wound, his unspoken plea. She thought of the pack, voiceless and broken, their children gasping in stillness. And she held on. She guided the void, channeled it, forced it to obey her. The curse cracked. From deep within the Bloodveil lands came the first sound, a howl, sharp and staggering, as a wolf's voice returned. Then another, and another, until the night rang with cries of freedom. The howling silence was broken. Isolde staggered back, her face pale, her shadows ripping apart under the force of the hollow soul. "No," she whispered, voice raw. "Not again. You cannot take my silence from me. It is all I have left." But the cavern told a different truth. The curse had unraveled. The Bloodveil Pack was free. And Elysia Duskbane, once rejected, once wolfless, stood at the heart of it all. Her emptiness turned to power, her voice the only one strong enough to shatter the silence. The silence was gone. Wolves howled in the distance, their voices rising in a chorus of freedom that echoed through the cavern walls. The curse had unraveled, its threads devoured by Elysia's hollow soul. Power still hummed in her veins, wild and dangerous, threatening to spill over. Across the cavern, Isolde Ravencroft collapsed to her knees. Her silver hair fell around her like a veil, her chest heaving, shadows flickering and dying around her trembling hands. For the first time, the witch looked not like a monster, but like a woman broken by grief too heavy to bear. Adrian Rowan groaned behind Elysia, blood still seeping from his wound, but his golden eyes never left her. The mate bond pulsed with his silent plea, "End this." Elysia raised her hand, void swirling in her palm. With one command, she could finish it. She could unmake Isolde, devour her voice, her power, her life. The pack would cheer her. Adrian would bow to her. She would prove she was not weak, not wolfless. But as her gaze locked on the witch, she saw it, the sorrow buried beneath rage, the heartbreak behind cruelty. She heard Isolde's earlier words,
Malric Rowan swore me love. Then he cast me out. Elysia's chest ached. She too knew rejection's sting, the hollow it left behind. Her hand lowered. "No," she said, her voice steady, clear, the only sound in the maw. "She will not become you." Isolde's head jerked up, her violet eyes wide with disbelief. Elysia knelt before her, pressing a trembling hand against the witch's shoulder. The hollow soul flared, not to devour, but to soothe. The void reached into Isolde's grief and pulled at it gently, siphoning fragments of pain, of betrayal, of silence. It did not heal her, not completely, but it lightened the weight. Isolde gasped, staggering back, clutching her chest as if something long locked had broken free. For the first time, her tears fell without shadow. You pity me?" she whispered, her voice cracking. "I understand you," Elysia answered softly. The witch's eyes shimmered with something fragile. Then she rose, her cloak sweeping around her, and fled into the dark tunnels of the maw, vanishing into exile. Elysia let her go. She had not won with death, but with mercy. Behind her, Adrian's ragged voice finally broke the silence, hoarse and trembling, but alive. "Elysia."
The journey back to the Bloodveil Pack was heavy with unspoken weight. Wolves howled from every corner of the territory, their voices proof of freedom restored. Yet as Elysia crossed the threshold of the pack lands, she felt the change in the air. It wasn't celebration, it was fear. They lined the path to the Alpha's house, wolves she had once healed, pups whose wounds she had tended, warriors whose bones she had set. Now their eyes tracked her like prey. Their whispers slithered through the crowd, too low for words, but the bond of their unease pressed heavy on her chest. Hollow soul, too powerful, not one of us. She caught fragments in their faces, fearful eyes darting away, lips curled in half-snarls, mothers clutching their children closer. The same pack that once called her wolfless now looked at her as something worse, not weak, dangerous. Adrian Rowan limped beside her, his body still marked by the witch's wound, yet his presence burned like a shield. His golden gaze swept the crowd with defiance, daring anyone to speak their doubts aloud. His silence was no longer curse-born, but deliberate, an alpha's unspoken warning. Still, the whispers did not fade. At the steps of the alpha's house, Elysia paused, her breath catching as memories of her rejection under the harvest moon flooded back. Once, she had stood here broken, stripped of dignity. Now she stood with power thrumming in her veins, the pack's fear laid bare before her. Her hands trembled. She had saved them, freed their voices. Yet now their voices turned against her. The forest's whisper brushed against her ear, gentle but firm. Power always costs. Even mercy breeds fear. She lifted her chin, meeting the pack's wary gazes. Let them whisper. She was not the girl they had scorned beneath the harvest moon. She was the hollow soul, and she would not bow again. But in her chest, the ache remained. Freedom had not brought belonging. It had brought suspicion. The murmurs of the Bloodveil Pack grew louder as Elysia and Adrian Rowan ascended the steps of the Alpha's house. Relief had returned their voices, but suspicion sharpened them. They spoke of curses and omens, of hollow souls and danger. Then a single, commanding voice cut through the crowd. Enough. Vivian Solaria stepped forward, her beauty sharpened by fury. Draped in silver silk that caught the moonlight, she was radiant, every inch the Luna she believed herself to be. Power shimmered around her like a mantle, her wolf half blazing beneath her skin. Her violet eyes fixed on Elysia with venomous precision.
You, she spat, pointing a trembling hand. You brought this upon us. Gasps rippled through the pack. Elysia stood still, her jaw tightening, but she did not flinch. Vivian's voice rose, clear and ringing, meant for every ear. We were safe before you meddled with things you did not understand. You claim to have broken the curse, but what are you really, Elysia Duskbane? Wolfless? Hollow? A weapon waiting to turn on us all? Whispers erupted. The pack shifted uneasily, their unease stoked into flames by Vivian's words. Mothers pulled their children closer. Warriors narrowed their eyes, hands twitching at their sides. Adrian's golden gaze blazed, but before he could step forward, Vivian pressed on. I stood beside you, Adrian. I was your Luna. I carried the weight of your rejection with dignity. And now you dare bring her back, this hollow soul, as if she belongs at your side? Her voice cracked, trembling with a mixture of rage and desperation. She is not one of us. She never was. The silence that followed was thick, heavy, expectant. All eyes turned to Adrian, waiting for his judgment. But Elysia felt the weight too. She stood before the pack that had scorned her, the woman who had replaced her, the whispers of fear pressing down like chains. Part of her wanted to vanish back into the forest, where whispers were kinder. Instead, she lifted her chin. Her heart thundered, but her voice was steady. If you think I do not belong, then say it plainly, Vivian, but do not forget, it was my emptiness that freed your voice tonight. The words hung sharp in the night, and the pack waited for Adrian's decision, the Alpha's verdict that would shatter one woman and crown another. The courtyard fell into a tense silence, every wolf watching, every breath held. The air itself seemed to still beneath the weight of Vivian Solaria's accusation and Elysia Duskbane's quiet defiance. At the center stood Adrian Rowan, his golden eyes burning like twin embers. Blood still stained his chest, where Isolde's strike had pierced him, but he stood tall, an alpha unbroken, his presence commanding even in silence. He turned first to Vivian. Her beauty was marred by fury, her lips trembling as she tried to hold her ground. Say it, Adrian, she demanded, her voice cutting. Tell them she is nothing. Tell them I am your Luna. The pack stirred restlessly, a storm of whispers rising. Adrian raised a single hand, and the noise died instantly. He looked at Vivian, not with the warmth he once gave her, nor even with anger, but with finality. Then his gaze shifted to Elysia. The mate bond flared hot, alive between them, pulsing with unspoken truth. His lips parted, and for a heartbeat, the curse seemed to mock him, choking off sound. But then, through sheer force of will, the silence cracked. His voice, hoarse but steady, rang out. My Luna is Elysia Duskbane. Gasps tore through the pack. Wolves staggered as though struck. Some recoiled, disbelief twisting their faces. Others dropped their heads in instinctive submission, bowing to the Alpha's word. Vivian's face drained of color. She whispered, No, you can't. But his voice grew stronger, fueled by truth and fire. I wronged her. Before the harvest moon, I cast her aside, and it was my greatest mistake. She is not wolfless. She is not broken. She is the hollow soul, the one who freed you all from silence. She is my mate, my equal, my Luna. Elysia's heart thundered, her breath caught between disbelief and a pain too raw to name. She had dreamed of hearing those words once, Now they came with the weight of the entire pack's eyes, their fear, their judgment. Adrian reached for her hand, not as command, but as vow. His golden eyes softened as the bond flared with meaning. I choose you. But in Elysia's chest, doubt coiled sharp and relentless.
The crowd's reaction rippled like wildfire through the courtyard. Gasps, murmurs, even growls of disbelief. Adrian Rowan's declaration hung heavy in the air, undeniable, irrevocable. But Elysia Duskbane felt none of the triumph the pack might have expected. Her pulse hammered, her throat tight, as Adrian's words replayed in her mind. My Luna is Elysia. Once, those words would have been everything. Once, she had ached for them, dreamed of hearing them spoken under the harvest moon. Now they cut as deep as they healed, because she could not trust them. Her gaze flicked to Vivian Solaria, whose face was frozen in a mask of shock and betrayal. Only hours ago, Vivian had stood at Adrian's side as his chosen Luna. Could love change so swiftly? Or was this not love at all, but guilt, gratitude, a debt he thought he owed her for breaking the curse? The mate bond hummed between them, alive with his emotions, remorse, determination, even something softer, something dangerous. But feelings carried through a bond could lie, twisted by desperation. Words spoken before the pack could mask motives. She pulled her hand from his grasp. Gasps rose again from the watching wolves, but Elysia didn't care. Her voice cut through the night, steadier than her heart. You speak now of love, of fate, but where was your truth when I needed it most? You rejected me beneath the harvest moon. You humiliated me before them all. And now, after I saved you, after I freed them, you decide I am your Luna? Why should I believe this isn't just another way to bind me to your will? The silence that followed was heavier than any curse. The pack shifted, uneasily torn between sympathy and suspicion. Adrian's golden eyes searched hers, raw and pleading, but she held his gaze with steel. In her chest, the mate bond pulsed hot, aching with the possibility of love, but her heart whispered caution. Elysia Duskbane would not be broken again. The pack had dispersed. The whispers lingered like smoke in the air. Some bowed to Adrian Rowan's word without question. Others slunk into the shadows with suspicion still carved into their eyes. But the true storm raged not in the packlands. It raged between him and Elysia Duskbane. In the days that followed, Adrian did not press her with more declarations. He did not command her presence or demand her acceptance as Alpha might. Instead, he lingered at the edges of her world, quietly, deliberately, as though waiting for the chance to be let in. When she returned to the healer's hut, he was there, bringing herbs gathered clumsily in his broad hands, roots half broken but carried with sincerity. She said nothing, taking them with a stiff nod, though her chest ached at the sight. When she tended to the pack's injured, Adrian came too, not as Alpha, but as helper. He knelt beside her, steadying writhing wolves while she wrapped wounds, his silence an act of service rather than curse. He said nothing, yet the bond hummed with unspoken words. Let me share the weight. At night, when the howls echoed over the forest, she often found him standing alone at the hollowed tree of Vera. Once she paused to watch him from a distance. He stood with his head bowed, his lips moving in soundless prayer, not to the goddess for strength, but to her for forgiveness. Elysia's heart warred with itself. She remembered his rejection, the way his words had cut her deeper than any blade. But she also saw the quiet persistence of a man stripped bare, willing to rebuild, not with force, but with patience. And though she tried to wall herself off, the bond betrayed her. Every act, every gesture, every steady look
carried across the tether, seeping into her bones. Adrian Rowan was no longer the alpha who had cast her aside. He was a man trying, fumbling, failing, but trying to win back a heart he once broke. And for the first time, Elysia feared her walls would not hold.
The moonlight bathed the whispering glade in silver as Elysia Duskbane stood alone at the edge of the forest. The air was cool, laced with the scent of pine and damp earth, but her chest was tight with the weight of unspoken truths. She heard him before she saw him. Adrian Rowan's footsteps were heavy but measured, his presence impossible to ignore. He stopped a few paces behind her, saying nothing, letting the silence stretch. When she finally turned, his golden eyes met hers, glowing faintly in the night. The bond pulsed, alive with his emotions, remorse, longing, hope. It was almost enough to undo her resolve. Almost. "You want me to believe you," she said quietly, her voice steady though her heart trembled. "To believe that you meant what you said before the pack, that I am your Luna, that you choose me?" She shook her head, her lips tightening. "But words are easy, Adrian. You've spoken them before, and you shattered me with them." His jaw tightened, but he did not interrupt. He only listened. "I cannot give you my heart again. Not like this. Not because of guilt or debt or the bond that refuses to let us go." Her eyes burned with unshed tears as she lifted her chin. "If you want me, if you truly love me, then you will prove it. Not with power, not with declarations shouted before the pack, but with time, with patience, with actions that show me the man you are, not the alpha." The bond throbbed, his emotions striking her like a storm. Pain, regret, and then, steady as the earth, resolve. He stepped closer, bowing his head ever so slightly, not as alpha, but as man. "Then time is yours," he said, his voice hoarse but certain. "I will wait as long as you need." Elysia's breath caught. The sincerity in his words shook her walls, though she held them firm. She turned away, staring into the silver-lit forest. This was her dilemma. Her heart yearned to leap toward him, but her scars demanded caution. And until she could reconcile the two, she would not surrender. Adrian Rowan had declared her his mate, but it was Elysia who would decide when, if ever, he truly became hers. The uneasy peace within the Bloodveil Pack did not last. At dawn, the scent of steel and smoke drifted across the borders. Elysia stood at the edge of the packlands beside Adrian Rowan as riders emerged from the trees. Grim-faced men and women clad in blackened armor, their cloaks bearing the silver insignia of their order. Crossbows gleamed at their backs, stakes at their belts, blades strapped across their chests. The Order of Ashen Silver had come. At their head rode Mara Ironveil, her dark hair braided tight, her eyes as sharp as the weapons she carried. She dismounted with the silence of a predator, her boots crunching against the frost-hardened ground. Her gaze swept the gathered pack, before landing squarely on Adrian, then shifting to Elysia with faint disdain. "Alpha Rowan," she said, her voice clipped, every syllable edged with authority. "We come with accusations." The pack bristled, growls rumbling low, but Adrian lifted a hand, forcing silence. His golden eyes burned as he met Mara's gaze. "What accusation?" His voice was steady, though roughened by wounds not yet healed. Mara's gaze hardened. 3 nights passed. A human family was slaughtered near the border village, their throats torn, their bones broken, their blood spilled in ways only wolves would leave.
Witnesses saw rogues moving in the shadows. You harbor them here, do you not, under your so-called mercy? A ripple of unease tore through the pack. Wolves exchanged wary glances. The alliance with rogues, fragile at best, was now threatened by human blood. Elysia felt the weight of suspicion fall like a stone. Her hollow soul stirred, the memory of unraveling curses fresh in her veins. She could taste the residue of the magic even now, clinging to the air like ash. And she knew, before she even spoke, that rogues were not the true culprits. But Mara's voice rang out again, sharp as steel. Deliver the rogues to us, or we will consider your pack complicit in their crimes. The order will not tolerate wolves who spill human blood. The air crackled with tension, the pack growling low, Adrian's jaw clenched tight, and at the center of it all, Elysia stood with the truth thrumming in her chest, truth no one else could see.
The courtyard pulsed with unease. The pack bristled, wolves shifting uneasily as Mara Ironveil's accusation hung sharp in the cold morning air. Rogues stood at the edges, their eyes wide and wary, their bodies tense as though ready to be torn apart. Elysia's hollow soul stirred, the remnants of the curse and its unraveling still echoing in her veins. She felt it even before she spoke, the residue of magic clinging faintly to the air, like soot after fire. It wasn't rogue, it wasn't wolf, it was something far darker. She stepped forward. It wasn't them. Mara's eyes flicked to her, narrowing. And who are you to speak for them? A wolfless girl the pack once scorned? Elysia lifted her chin, unflinching. I am the hollow soul. I can read what lingers after blood is spilt. She swept her gaze toward the pack, then back to the hunters. And what I sense of not wolf, not rogue, it is hollow-born. A ripple of shock tore through the gathered wolves. Whispers broke like waves. The hollow-born, the skinless, the forsaken. Mara's face hardened, but Elysia pressed on. Their magic leaves a trail, cold, jagged, wrong. I've felt it before in the shattered maw. The family wasn't slaughtered by rogues. They were consumed by hollowborn. Adrian's golden eyes burned with sudden clarity, the mate bond thrumming with his support. But Mara only folded her arms, her expression sharp. Convenient. Blame phantoms when the rogues are standing before you. Easy words from a girl who bends magic no wolf should touch. Elysia clenched her fists, her voice steady, though her heart pounded. If you kill them, you kill innocence. Give me time, Mara Ironveil. Let me prove the truth. If I am wrong, I will deliver the rogues to you myself. The silence that followed was suffocating. The pack stared, torn between fear and hope. Rogues held their breath, lives balanced on her words. Finally, Mara's eyes narrowed. Prove it, or blood will answer blood. The courtyard was taut as a drawn bowstring, every wolf and rogue bristling under Mara Ironveil's cold command. The Order of Ash and Silver stood like statues of steel, their hands resting on crossbows, blades gleaming in the pale light. Elysia stepped forward, leaving the shelter of the pack behind. Her cloak stirred in the wind, the firelight from torches catching in her dark hair. She looked small before Mara's armored hunters, but her voice, steady and unyielding, carried like a blade. If you doubt me, then stake the judgment on me alone. Mara's brows arched. Explain yourself. Elysia lifted her chin. You say wolves slaughtered humans. I say Hollowborn did. Give me 3 nights to prove it. If I fail, you may take my life as payment, and Adrian Rowan will not stand in your way. Gasps rippled through the pack. Adrian's growl tore from his chest before he could stop it, his golden eyes blazing. No!
but Elysia cut him off with a sharp look. The mate bond thrummed between them, fierce and unshakable. "Trust me." Mara studied her in silence, her cold eyes flicking from Elysia to Adrian, then to the rogues whose lives dangled by a thread. At last, a thin smile curved her lips. Brave words for a hollow soul, or foolish. She stepped closer, her steel breastplate gleaming, her voice dropping low enough that only Elysia could hear. "Do you even know what the Hollowborn are? What they leave behind?" Elysia's throat tightened, but she did not waver. "I've seen it, felt it. Their magic is hunger made flesh. Wolves do not leave such a stain." Mara studied her a moment longer, then straightened. 3 nights, she declared, her voice ringing like iron. "Fail, and your life is forfeit. Prove it, and the order withdraws." The pack erupted into murmurs, fear and hope crashing together. Rogues exhaled in ragged disbelief. Adrian stepped to Elysia's side, fury simmering in his eyes. "You risk yourself too easily." She looked at him, her own voice quiet but unyielding. "Better me than them."
The 3 nights that followed were a crucible. Elysia Duskbane scoured the borderlands with Adrian Rowan at her side, her hollow soul straining with every step. The rogues trailed in silence, their lives balanced on the edge of her success. The Order shadowed them too, hunters in black steel watching with eyes sharp as blades, waiting for her to fail. On the second night, the trail appeared. Ash clung to the trees like soot after fire, though no flame had touched them. The ground bore strange marks, not paw prints, not human, but twisted impressions as if the earth recoiled from what walked upon it. The air itself reeked of something sharp and cold, a wrongness that prickled against her hollow soul. Elysia knelt, pressing her palm to the blackened soil. Her void stirred, drinking in the residue, unraveling its signature. A shiver tore through her as visions flickered across her mind. Jaws too wide, skin stretched too thin, eyes hollow as caverns. The Hollowborn. Her voice trembled as she spoke. "Here, this is their work." Mara Ironveil dismounted with a scowl, crouching beside her. "Prove it." Elysia pressed her palm deeper into the earth, letting her hollow soul drink until her veins burned. The residue unraveled, spilling its truth. She gasped, eyes widening as she pulled fragments of memory from the stain. Screams, shadows, blood, and then, clear as moonlight, the Hollowborn's distorted cry. She staggered back, pointing toward the cliffs. "They came from there. Not rogues, Hollowborn." As if summoned, the shadows shifted. A Hollowborn lurched from the rocks, its skin gray and stretched tight over bone, its body twisted in unnatural ways. Its scream tore the night, a sound more curse than voice. The hunters froze in shock, until Elysia raised her hand, her hollow soul flaring. The creature lunged, but its magic unraveled on contact with her void, crumbling into ash that scattered on the wind. The silence that followed was absolute. Mara rose slowly, her sharp eyes fixed on Elysia. Then, with a curt nod, she turned to her hunters. "The rogues are innocent. Withdraw." Relief crashed through the rogues in waves, tears mixing with growls of triumph. The pack watched in stunned silence, their fear now tempered with awe. Elysia stood trembling, her chest heaving, the void in her veins quieting. She had saved them, not with claws, not with brute force, but with the emptiness once called her curse. The silence that fell in the wake of the hunter's departure was heavier than any curse. It was a silence born of awe, thick and breathless, settling over the packlands like a shroud of new fallen snow. The rogues stood free, their disbelief giving way to a raw, trembling gratitude that radiated from them in waves. Every eye, wolf, rogue, and elder, was fixed on Elysia Duskbane. She stood with Adrian at her side, her small frame no longer looking fragile, but anchored to the earth by a power they were only just beginning to comprehend. The whispers that had once called her wolfless and broken had died on their lips. The fear that had painted her as a monster had curdled into reverence. She had not commanded them, had not threatened them. She had simply offered her own life to save the innocent, and in doing so had shown them the true nature of her strength. A warrior near the front, one whose gash she had stitched in silence just weeks ago, was the first to move. He dropped his head, then sank to one knee, his bow a silent testament to the Luna he had misjudged. Another followed, then a dozen more. The gesture swept through the crowd like a tide, wolves of the Bloodveil Pack lowering themselves before the woman they had once cast out. Mothers who had pulled their pups away from her touch now bowed their heads in shame and respect. Elders who had muttered of her weak bloodline now acknowledged a power far older and deeper than their own. Elysia's heart hammered against her ribs, but for the first time it was not with fear or humiliation. She felt the weight of their submission settle upon her shoulders, not as a burden, but as a mantle. She looked at Adrian, and in his golden eyes she saw no surprise, only fierce, unwavering pride. He did not bow, but stood as her equal, the mate bond singing between them with a truth that needed no words. They had feared her emptiness, but now they saw it for what it was, their salvation. She was no longer Elysia Duskbane, the broken healer, the rejected mate. She was the hollow soul of the Bloodveil Pack, their Luna, and she would not be broken again. Later, when the celebratory howls of the pack had softened to a contented murmur, Elysia found herself drawn to the quiet sanctity of the hollowed tree of Vera. Its roots glowed faintly in the moonlight, the ancient magic of the glade humming a peaceful song. She did not need to turn to know Adrian was there. He approached not with the commanding stride of an alpha, but with a quiet reverence, stopping beside her in the silvered shadows. He did not reach for her. He simply stood, his presence a warm and steady weight in the cool night air. "I was a fool," he began, his voice low, stripped of all pride. "I thought power was a wolf's roar, the strength of a perfect bloodline. I looked at you and saw only what was missing. I never saw the strength in your silence, in your mercy, in the void that makes you whole." His golden eyes met hers, and the mate bond pulsed with a warmth so profound it stole her breath. It was not the jagged pain of rejection or the desperate plea of the curse. It was pure, unwavering devotion. "Your heart is your own, Elysia," he continued, his voice thick with emotion. "I broke it once, and I will spend a lifetime earning the right to stand beside it. I am not asking you to be my Luna because the pack demands it, or because our bond commands it. I am asking because I love you. The healer, the outcast, the hollow soul, all of it. I will wait for you to trust me, forever, if that is what it takes." His vow settled in her chest, not as a weight, but as an anchor. The last of her scars did not vanish, but they ceased to ache. He was not trying to fix what was broken. He was loving her for the beautiful, powerful way she had pieced herself back together. Slowly, she lifted her hand, and, for the first time, she initiated the touch, her fingers lacing through his. His hand closed around hers, a silent promise returned. The forest whispered its approval around them. Elysia Duskbane, once rejected and scorned, stood ready to walk into her destiny, strong,
loved, and gloriously unbroken.
And so, the rejected soul became the pack's salvation. Elysia's journey from scorned healer to the hollow soul Luna is complete, but her story with Adrian is just beginning. What did you think of her incredible transformation? Do you believe Adrian truly earned her forgiveness? Let us know your favorite moment in the comments below. If you were captivated by the world of the Bloodveil Pack, please show your support by hitting that like button and subscribing to the channel. Don't forget to ring the notification bell so you're the first to know when the next story unfolds. Thank you for watching. Stay tuned and see you on the next one.